Oh, hi, sorry. I was trying to get some more Xenoblade Chronicles 2 done before our live stream wrap-up thingamajig. But since you're here, why not join me for my top of the year list thing video? It's going to be less than 10. Sorry. So, because I'm indecisive and incompetent, I've only really got a top 4 list, but that's only because there's only 4 games I can really say are rankable. Everything else is what I consider to be a solid 5th place experience, with their own little niggles getting in the way of getting a proper rank. I could probably rank some a little higher, but it ended up in this weird circle thing of X game is better than Y game, and Y game is better than Z game, but for whatever reason, Z game is better than X. So, since that's no way to run a top 10 list, or whatever list it ended up being, I've done it this way, so I hope you'll forgive me for that. With that in mind, don't be upset about the order that these first few games are in, because it's completely random. I don't even know what order I'm recording them in yet. Whilst I don't feel like I can justify putting Xenoblade on here properly for realsies, since I've not finished it yet, I should probably give a couple of thoughts on it so that it's here for posterity's sake. My displeasure with the way that the first game did things is not a secret. I didn't enjoy the combat, the world, most of the characters, or the way that side quests were dealt with. In Chronicles 2, however, literally everything is better for me. Combat is easier for me to understand and undertake, and just generally more interesting, whilst Rex is still a pretty bland protagonist. Every member of the supporting cast is superb. The fact that quests have little pictures to remind you of who and where you're looking for someone to hand things in is welcome, and the latest update to the minimap system makes it even easier to find where that one person you need to find is. And the music, oh. People say that the music for Chronicles 1, and I guess the Xeno games in general, was pretty good. I was pretty meh on that front, but Xenoblade Chronicles 2 has honestly had me standing still in the middle of towns or islands or fields just to sit and listen to the music happen. So far looking good. A good way to end 2017. But anyway, on to the real sort of list. Yeah. Persona 5 is another one of those games where the cast and story pulls me through. I'm glad that I can finally say I managed to beat a Persona game after the disappointment that was Persona 4 Golden for me, but I'm not necessarily chomping at the bit to get the next installment. I still don't really understand how the whole Persona creation fusion thingamajig business works, and honestly I don't actually care enough about replaying the game to find out. The only thing I am bummed out about is that I don't have the patience to sit through the actual game again enough to be able to unlock everyone's maximum social link thing, because as I say, the characters are my real draw to the game, and they're all kind of fun to be around, except for Ryuji. Guy's a moron shouting everything from the rooftops. It's a miracle we weren't caught in the first 20 minutes, to be honest with you. The journey that Kinross, Ningle, and I went on to promote the popularity of the infamous Ningles and to free everyone's hearts was almost enjoyable from beginning to end, with the only real stopping points being some slightly wonky dungeon design and a few encounters that just kicked my ass for no reason other than to make me take longer to beat the game. The music is far more memorable to other people, but I do recall noticing and enjoying a couple of bits here and there, but it's not really my cup of tea, so after however long it's been, I really don't remember much of it. I'm probably waffling, which I apologise for. I just wanted to put this here because it was a defining moment for me of JRPG marathoning with an interesting enough story and cast, though once again held up by certain gameplay elements that towards the end I began to feel more and more like a chore. So up next we have something that'll be a little bit briefer, as there's not really a great deal to say about Doki Doki Literature Club, other than the fact that I found it before it got super memey, In that regard, I am a DDLC hipster. I did enjoy the twists and turns that the narrative and mechanics took, though I can definitely see how people playing it now would see it as something super overrated. So I guess in that regard, I can sort of liken it to my experience with Undertale, except I'm not professing the wonder of Doki Doki to the masses, whereas I just don't get Undertale after everyone's sort of told me it's amazing. In other ways, I guess it's also sort of like Hatoful Boyfriend, where there's this weird stuff going on, and people are like, oh look, it's so wacky, but underneath, or in Hatoful's case at the end, there's something a little bit more bizarre and interesting. And really, sometimes that's all I want out of a short pay what you want visual novels. Something to stick with me for a bit and think on for a few days, and that's why it's on my list of good experiences 2017. I loved Hyrule Warriors. What I didn't love was how it went about delivering its post-game content in the form of that giant map full of challenges and puzzles to solve, to unlock said challenges, to unlock some items and characters, and then the DLC that added another map that I never even touched. Whilst I've not super dived into it still, I can at least say that Fire Emblem Warriors History Mode does a fantastic job of delivering a ton of content in manageable chunks, which stops casual Warriors players such as myself from being overwhelmed. Whilst the game does suffer from a mild imbalance of classes due to the sheer number of sword wielders, combat is as fun as any other Warriors game. You see 1,000 dudes? Time to hack those dudes down. Turn around, there's another 1,000 dudes. Dudes aren't going to slay themselves, so get to it. And if that could be made the box quote or the blurb or whatever for the next Warriors game, credit me. Thanks. Kinross. Kinross. Up to this point, my only exposure to the Warriors games have been the Nintendo-based ones, and I hope to someday rectify that. But thus far, whilst I don't quite have the attachment to Fire Emblem as I do Zelda, pretty much everything is done better in Fire Emblem Warriors. I could actually believe that the story was designed as a Fire Emblem story, albeit shorter compared to Hyrule Warriors, which seemed to be this weird fanfic thing that didn't really feel like a Zelda game. It was just randomly Zelda people. The tactical map for controlling party members is a welcome addition, though sometimes the AI does still decide that it wants to do its own thing and attack a fort that it's super weak against. But I guess you can't have everything. Hands up, I never played the first Steamworld Dig game, and Heist never really seemed all that interesting, but one day I woke up and I just wanted to mine and dig. I wanted to bury deep in the ground and find some loot. And on that day, Steamworld Dig 2 happened to be released for the Switch, so I picked it up. And I'm glad I did. Whilst I am left behind in the story department, there's some Vectron thing that's bad and a robot that went and dealt with it, but maybe he didn't deal with it and we have to find out? Maybe? I enjoyed Steamworld for its mining and its unlockables. And related to that, I like the fact that I can spend upgrade points, and then if I don't like it or find something that's a bit more useful, I can unspend those points and respend them on something else, which is pretty great, to be honest with you. There's honestly not a great deal for me to say about Steamworld Dig 2, just that if any of the B-roll footage looks remotely fun to you, check it out. It's one of my personal favourites for just sitting back and relaxing whilst I blow up some bucks for cash, and I just want more people to join the fun. Right, here we go. Kicking off my proper list, we jump to the future, where humanity is nothing more than a few tribes in one really big city in the desert for some reason, where giant robot dinosaurs roam around, and sometimes you can climb them to hack their FM radios. Or is it GPS? I'm not sure. But either way, I am of course talking about Horizon Zero Dawn, which takes my number 4 spot. Perhaps Horizon's biggest downfall is that I played it after Zelda, which seems unfair, but such is the way of things. As I've discussed in a previous episode, coming from such a free and literally open world experience as Zelda was, to then instantly be put into this open world where there's plenty of places that the developer clearly doesn't want you to go, and perhaps understandably. It does feel incredibly jarring and more than a little bit frustrating. Again, this is no fault of Horizons, but it's impossible for me to separate these two experiences in my mind. So just worth bearing in mind. What I consider to be a more reasonable flaw of the game is that the way that it dealt with combat, or more specifically, how it made me deal with combat, I guess. Relatively early on in the game, you're given a quest to go out and clear a cauldron, which is Horizon's version of a dungeon. And at the end, there's obviously a boss, and defeating the boss makes it easier to hack certain robo-beasts, and yada yada yada. The problem is that at the level that you're probably going to discover that quest, I honestly believe it is impossible to succeed. I threw myself at it for several hours, and because I thought the reason it's given me this quest is because it's actually super important to my ability to progress in the game, and my ability to actually beat the game. I thought that I had to hack or beat all these cauldrons in order to unlock the end game, which isn't the case. But I didn't realise that until later on, so I lowered the difficulty and managed to then beat the boss eventually. Hooray! And so I left the cauldron and never realised that, or never remembered to raise it back up again. Or did I might have actually found that I was playing on hard, and then obviously lowered it down to easy. I'm not sure. It was something like that. But I never figured to raise it because combat was still enough of a challenge, but it never really forced me to try to use anything other than my bow or to hit things with my magic stick, which, now that I think about it, is another area I can't really help but praise Zelda's random decision to have weapons break so easily, which forces you to obviously use something more than that one purple ranked item you've bought and used for the last 20 hours without considering changing it because the stats are good. But with this aside, as with many games, if you get me hooked on your cast or your story, I can mostly look past mechanical issues like combat and the like, and that's super the case here. The moment the first trailer aired and we saw this primitive-looking girl watching a herd of robosaurs roam the plains, I couldn't help but wonder what the hell had happened to allow such a thing to happen, and Horizon is near flawless with its pacing, slowly revealing more and more of the past and its place in the future, allowing you to gradually build your own theories along with Aloy until the truth is finally revealed to you. And as a good story should, whilst the reveal is a surprise, it's not out of the blue. You've followed the game's logic well enough to be able to join in with any leaps that the game does take. Like, if you had a little bit more information, you could totally have predicted where the game is going. And I appreciate that in a story, whereas sometimes they just make huge leaps of faith that really sort of break it for me. The world is truly impressive, and as I say, the cast, I enjoyed being around pretty much the entire time and would love to be around more. Aloy is a great protagonist, and I honestly look forward to seeing what Guerrilla produce next in the series. Though where it stands with Aloy clearly becoming more of a mascot type character, I'm not really sure where her place is in the expanded world, just because Horizon Zero Dawn was such a beginning-end arc for her. So it'll be interesting to see, but at the very least, I'll pick up the second one. That's as good as you can get, really, isn't it? Right, I'm sure this is higher on other people's list, but as someone who's never been a huge fan of the 3D Mario games, Odyssey being my number 3 is pretty impressive in and of itself, and you can just ask Abby about that. Beloved by many, I can't get over my pain of playing Mario 64 with what felt like clunky controls, a dickish camera, and more than a couple infuriating worlds. I'm looking at you, Wet Dry World. Sunshine, on the other hand, couldn't keep me interested enough to want to beat it. Flood felt cumbersome more often than I would like, and the few worlds I saw were fairly forgettable. Galaxy 1 was my favourite simply because it was nice and linear and there wasn't much in the way of potential control issues, and in my mind Galaxy 2 was hindered by the addition of Yoshi and the weird hot pepper mechanic where he ran and was a pain in the ass to steer, and I kept flying off planets. So with that as a brief rundown of my history with 3D Mario, enter Super Mario Odyssey. A sandbox Mario game a la 64 and Sunshine with hundreds of collectibles. Needless to say, I was hesitant, but turns out I shouldn't have worried. On the whole, the game feels infinitely better to control than past iterations, though locking certain actions behind motion controls definitely feels like it makes some moons physically impossible to collect. And the capture mechanic makes everything feel fresh. With every new world you see various new enemies and creatures, and you just have to wonder yourself, can I be that dude? Oh yeah, mother flippin' spring bird. Some of which have this truly giggle-worthy consequences, either for what they do or the simple fact that this T-Rex has a mustache on his face, and that's a little bit weird, right? Far improved from Sunshine, every kingdom is unique and memorable in its own way, and rather than whole worlds of frustration where I just want it to be done with as soon as possible so that I can leave, there are at most a couple small sections here and there that I'd rather not revisit, but I don't mind doing so. Given the game's 800 plus moons, it's impressive how many different ways they've managed to hide them, though it does lead into my biggest issue with the game. During each kingdom you have to collect enough moons to power the Odyssey to get to the next, and yada yada yada. Once you hit the end of the game, you're given a new total to unlock something, and then another. But after that, you're actually left entirely to your own motivation, which I'm not great at. Must have at least 250 moons to collect, but I find it increasingly hard to motivate myself to do it when I know that there's not much more in the way of rewards for me. This is clearly my own fault, but I can't help but wonder why they felt the need to put quite so many moons in. It's not like every single moon is original, so they could have cut back somewhat. Super Mario Odyssey is a game of great moments, most of which I consider spoilers, so I can't cover them here, but each one, be it a certain capture or cutscene, an NPC interaction or a musical interlude or some weird little quirk about a kingdom, brings a little smile to my face, and for that reason I feel like it deserves a spot on my super serious ranked list for 2017. Yakuza Zero was never on my radar. I would have never picked up a prequel to a franchise 5 games deep that I'd never even heard of, let alone played, until a certain person started talking about these bizarre side stories, and for whatever reason, mostly because it was 60% off on the PlayStation Store, I picked it up and gave it a go. And since it's my number 2 spot, it's evidently a good thing I did. Whilst I have issues with Kiryu's character arc, after all there's not a great deal you can do to your series protagonist on a prequel, I still enjoyed his odd charm and desire to do good by everyone, as well as pay for everything in cash. You have to admire that in a guy. But the guy who really stole the show for me was obviously Majima, who I was disappointed to find out plays a smaller role in the main series than he does here, but all the same I loved every second with this super reluctant guy who's clearly being screwed by the world, and doing what's best for him and those around him, all while kicking ass by the medium of breakdancing. I'm nowhere near complete with the sub-stories, and though the numbering system is complete bollocks, I'm sure I can work out a way to play most of them, and I look forward to doing so. There's just so many things to do that it's almost overwhelming, so who can blame me for spending 4 hours just relaxing, running my cabaret club, and making it the best damn club in town. In a world where side quests so regularly feel like, kill this guy, bring me this thing, take that thing, it's refreshing to live in Yakuza's world where I don't recall a single quest that was quite so simple. Every one had some weird twist to it, either as a result of Kiryu or Majima, or just because the city is just that weird a place. And none of them felt like a chore. Some even had me wishing I could play them again just so I can kick a conman's ass or help a kid play a video game. Yakuza Zero has introduced me to the world of Yakuza, and I look forward to playing Kiwami in the new year, just so I can see how crazy old Majima ends up getting. Unsurprisingly, perhaps, my game of the year is none other than The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Whilst there are certainly issues that I have with the game, climbing in the rain and the lackluster story, as well as a couple of quality of life issues, for example, there's just so much more that I love. I've never felt more at home and entranced by an open world game, almost enough that the initial reveal that it would be a full open world game terrified me. And whilst most of my praises may have been present in other games, none has managed to convince me to stay long enough in that world to find that out. But the Hunt for Shrines, at least, has kept me super curious about the world and every nook that it has. In an earlier episode, I said that it was very close second for my favourite Zelda game, just behind Wind Waker, and was let down solely by its somewhat disjointed story that just sort of happened to be there. But this is a game of mechanics, exploration, and wonder, and it does that magnificently. If this is the formula that the Zelda team decides to follow from now on, I can't wait to see what grand adventures they manage to weave. After all, we all wondered just how far Aonuma and his team would go when he declared that they were revisiting Zelda conventions, and doing this as the franchise passes 30 years old is a welcome attitude to take. Even if it's the silly little things, like being able to jump when you want to rather than just because you legged it to a cliff edge, doing away with traditional dungeons to allow for more concise experiences, but allowing the dungeon design to permeate the shrine system, not having items in said dungeons that are regularly only used for that one dungeon and then never touched again. But weirdly, perhaps most importantly for me, is the decision to finally improve how saving works. No longer are you loading into the beginning of a dungeon or the entrance to a field or some random place that you don't even remember. You actually come back where you saved. And I know it sounds stupid to be pleased about something like this in 2017 when everyone else has been doing it for years, but really that's what this is all about. It's about a company moving forward at last, and that's pretty great. For me, the soundtrack does exactly what it needs to do, and for that reason is perfect. Yeah, you don't have quite as many instantly hummable tunes as in past Zelda games or hell any other game, but the broken nature of the music as you roam around is totally appropriate for what the moment calls for, and is only there to enhance the experience and never gets in the way of your enjoyment. Except for the beginning of the Guardian theme, which is, as far as I'm aware, there to inspire terror into your very soul as you try to work out what the hell that beast is, and to try and run away, or flail at it wildly with a twig. Music in towns has always felt weird to me, because I've always wondered, where's this music coming from? And as far as I recall, every single town piece sounds like someone could be playing it right there and then. It's simple enough, it's in tune with the culture of the town, and it feels like it belongs, which, again, is exactly what a soundtrack should do for me. To me, Zelda is the best game of 2017, not only because it does so many things well that I hope other games take inspiration from, but also because they were able to look at the series and say, okay, what do we need to change? What needs to be improved? What does this series need? And just going with it. It's a further hint that Nintendo aren't quite as stuck in routine in the past as they used to be, and it's a game of a promising future for both the people of Hyrule and us as gamers, and in what has been a pretty crappy year in anything other than video gaming, I feel like that's an important message to take away. So that's my top 4 and a bit list for 2017. I'd love to hear what you thought about my list, and I'd love to hear your own lists, either in the comments down below or during our live stream later in January. I wish you all the very best in 2018 and hope that you'll stick around to see what we have in store for you here at Permadeath. For now, thank you very much, and we'll see you in the history.